question is, can you actually hear me?
Mike's not on.
Not for the
Well,
mic.
I'm not sure just how far I can turn this thing up before it goes thermonuclear.
A little bit at a time here.
Possibly so, but I'm not. Okay. Have it pointed towards me?
Right, exactly. That's why you have to have that.
He's cranking here. A little further. A little further.
Yeah, she's just
Maybe try the.
I think she's running on.
Maybe this will work. Maybe. Maybe.
Shall I just see it for him?
Well, you know, that gets me up to the halfway point. That's probably about as much as we can get before we blow the equipment. Okay. So, all right, a couple more coming in. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention, please, if you're not here to watch the golf game over by the bar, or even if you are. My name is David Ware. Sometimes I hang out at the Capitol. More often these days I hang out in the State Archives, where I have the honor of being the guy who knows the least in the room. In other words, I'm the boss. But my topic tonight takes us back beyond the usual scope of Arkansas archival history, back into the early 18th century. My topic for today, on the eve of the 300th anniversary of the first recorded European person to wander through this neighborhood. Notice I don't use the term discovery or mention a particular rock. One that I think is inappropriate. The other is, well, maybe you would make a little bit too much of that rock, which might have gotten a passing mention or in fact no mention at all. We're used to intoning, usually to visitors from out of town, that in 1722, Jean-Baptiste Benard de la Harpe, who we just call La Harpe because we can't remember the rest of it, a French explorer discovered the Little Rock, and then not much happened around here for a bit under the century until they moved the capital here in 1821 and things got interesting for real estate agents. My goal for this afternoon, for the assembled multitudes here and whoever might wander in from the bar, is to put Monsieur La Harpe into context. This will require mentioning a few other Frenchmen. So be warned, there will be some French spoken. Not much, just a little bit. And we'll be also talking of other places, of Texas, of Oklahoma, and Brittany, and Brazil. And it may even require a little singing on your part. If you have not received a handout, make sure that you have one. Your part in this endeavor will be made manifest soon enough. Fair warning? All right. So, to begin with, a little bit of background. Thank you, Mandy. Let's talk very briefly, because I don't have a semester to do it, about the French in the New World. From the early 1600s to the early 1700s. Back actually in the 1500s, in the 1530s, a French captain from the town of Saint-Malo, Jacques Cartier, established a French claim in North America. And the French, like any other good imperial power, simply kept expanding that claim. It grew and it grew. From the valley of the St. Lawrence River, up in what we call Canada, over a vast area stretching down the Mississippi Valley all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Now the question arises, what did the French do with this colony? Who ran this colony? At the very beginning, the French crown simply left it to the merchants who thought they could make some money out here. The problem was that during the 1600s, exploration was slow, growth was even slower, even up in Canada, relatively small populations. Basically, the merchants were losing their grip. So in the latter part of the century, the crown nationalized it, made New France a crown colony. And in 1715, put an entrepreneur in charge of the colony and of the fortunes of France. We're talking about a decisive man, and no, not the Harpe. We're not there yet. We're talking instead about a Scotsman named John Law. He was a fast-talking card player, a very successful duelist who had to flee Britain because he got too successful with the wrong man. Ended up playing cards in France with the nobility. He was whipping them at cards and convincing them that he knew how to fix the sort of shaky economy of the French kingdom. How to do that? That would require another lecture. But let us say that he talked the French treasurer's office into funding a vast state bank. And how to get money to put into the bank? Build the colonies. John Law, this Scots financier, this economist, this card player, manages to convince the French government to basically give him control over much of the southern part of New France, the part of New France known as Louisiana. His idea was to explore this area, looking for riches and markets and partners, and to establish large colonies in the Mississippi Valley, including one right by the old trading post where the Arkansas and the Mississippi and the White all kind of run together, the place that we call Arkansas Post. Now, John Law was given a great amount of authority. His company, the Company of the Indies, or as people usually call it, the Mississippi Company, they could appoint their own governor and officers and make land grants to whoever they wanted, whoever they thought could make money here. In turn, the company accepted the responsibility of transporting 6,000 colonists and 3,000 enslaved people to actually build up the economy, to make it a going proposition. Law said, we can do this and more. Just trust me. And we all know what happens when you hear that, especially from a smooth-talking Scots economist. What could go wrong? And the answer is plenty. The Mississippi Company eventually collapsed, what in the episode known as the Mississippi Bubble. We'll get back to talking about Mr. Law's bubble very briefly later, but let us instead go to the man of the hour. At this point, we enter the world of Ensign Jean-Baptiste Benard, or Benard de la Harpe, as we call him around here. Who is this man? He is a son of the toughest seaport in France, Saint-Malo, in Bretagne, or Brittany. Saint-Malo. Anybody ever been there? Okay. Trust me, I'm not making this up. Go there and see for yourself. It is in the Brittany region in northwestern France. It is situated on the English Channel, or as the people who know call it, La Manche, and on the right bank of the estuary of the river Rance. It's an old walled city that stands on a granite island that's joined to the mainland by a causeway. Once it was a port known around the world for its mariners. Now it's a town of about 40,000 people, grows to about 300,000 in the summer because everybody wants to vacation there because it's a cool place to be. Beautiful beaches, Mont Saint-Michel next door. At any rate, I get ahead of myself here. Saint-Malo was born as a little Gallo-Roman port in the 1st century BC. The little port was eventually named Saint-Malo in honor of a poor Welsh monk named Maclou, or Malo, who made his headquarters in the island somewhere in the 6th century AD. He was accompanied by, or soon followed, by the men who had brought him into the priesthood. 2 Irishmen, St. Aaron and St. Brendan. This Brendan was, by the way, the famed navigator who somewhere in that century is believed to have sailed to the New World in a leather coracle. And I'll tell you what, going in a boat with no bow or stern across the North Atlantic, that would take something it would take an Irish monk to even try. As though something of Brendan's spirit is believed to have sort of come down through the years to Saint-Malo. Saint-Malo, by the early 18th century, the time we're talking about, was famous for its navigators, its traders, and its privateers, or as unpolite people called them, pirates. Yes, indeed. The fame of Saint-Malo is in fact reflected in the French sea shanty. The words to the shanty are in the handout that I gave you, and I would enjoy if you would please join with me in these, because we're going to come back to the whole idea of sea shanties, which are work songs. They're meant to give you some rhythm. So if you can, come up to your feet, ladies and gentlemen. You can't sing sitting down. So So let us try this. The Capitan of Saint-Malo. If you're game, let us sing. Let's drown out that golf game in a nice way, of course. And remember, if you can't sing on key, neither could most of the sailors. And it goes this way. Un Capitan de Saint-Malo, ali allo, qui fait le pêche au cachalot, ali allo, ali allo. Il donne la route à ses matelots, ali allo, en coupe de barre d'équido, ali allo, ali allo. Il mange la viande et laisse les os, ali allo. Il boit le vin et tout de l'eau, ali allo, ali allo. Et son séquent qui est dans l'eau, ali allo. Il fume le cigare, lui laisse les mégots, ali allo, ali allo. Il a 3 fils au point du pot, ali allo. À Nantes, au Havre et à Bordeaux, ali allo, ali allo. Very good, very good. For those of you who are not cursed with knowing French, let me simply say, the second verse refers to his hitting the men with the handles of a windlass to keep them working. The third one says he eats the beef and gives them the bones. He drinks the wine and gives them water. His second bait is, Salo refers to a person of ungenteel parentage, a bastard, to put it too mildly. He smokes his cigars and he tosses the butts to the men to finish. And then in the last verse, at least the one we can print, we talk about the captain's honeys in 3 ports, all of them nice, beautiful, brown-skinned women. After this point, the song becomes unprintable because even if you don't understand French, you can figure it out from context. Let's just say, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a sailor's song, and this is inspired by the kind of town that would produce Benard de la Harpe. Now, the inhabitants of Saint-Malo are called Malouins in French. One such was, of course, Jacques Cartier, the great explorer who in 1535 sailed from Saint-Malo all the way up the St. Lawrence River to the site of present-day Quebec City and Montreal. He's the first European to encounter the natives there using the term Canada to indicate a bunch of houses from which, of course, the name Canada comes. So we blame Saint-Malo for our having a country called Canada, just to the north of us. But what of Jean-Baptiste Benard de la Harpe? He's born in 1683. He comes from a quality family, a merchant family, not perhaps upper class, not nobility, not even the gentry, but they've got some money. They take their name from a little street in central Saint-Malo where they make their beds for at least for a while. The street is still there. There's a first-class restaurant. I've never eaten there because I can't afford it. The family name is Benard. In some accounts, it's Bernard. We're not sure why they exactly merited the suffix de la Harpe, but they took it anyway. He is one of 11 or 12 children. And the problem with being one of 11 or 12 children is the first one gets the money and everybody else gets a good luck. And he is one like that. He had no huge inheritance. And so in 1701, Jean-Baptiste Benard runs away to join an army fighting in Spain as an officer of cavalry. You're thinking 1683, he's young for an officer, but you know, he's a young man of some prospects. He either has some connections, a letter of introduction, or else he's able to sweet talk his way into getting on a horse, instead of walking around the battlefield like the poor proletariat. He soon returns home, though, to Saint-Malo, because there's nothing worse than being a cavalryman in Spain on a hot summer's day. He signs on as an ensign on a ship named the Saint-Esprit, bound to the South Seas without a license for a trading expedition. He gets off the Saint-Esprit in Peru. In 1705, we find him working in Peru as a merchant. Benard talks big about his fortune back home, his castles in Normandy, that sort of thing, and he catches the eye of a wealthy widow, Doña Maria de Roquefort, who back when her family knew her, she's Marie de Vitsolier, a nice Flanders girl who married a fast-talking Spanish fellow who had some mining properties in Peru. By this time, she is a wealthy widow. She is, to put it delicately, twice Benard's age. Nevertheless, the two hit it off, at least initially. She wanted a boy toy, let's face it, and the ticket home. She's tired of Peru. He, on the other hand, well, let's just say that he wanted a secure footing and leave it at that. They had things that they could say were mutual interests. Getting rich and staying rich. He apparently made all sorts of promises, alluded to these properties that he and his family had in France, his big inheritance they'd be getting any day, and suggested with their fortunes put together by a marriage contract, they could live large and live at home, go back to Paris and trip the light fantastic. The couple returns to France in January of 1706, and shortly thereafter, Maria begins efforts to get out of the bargain. She had wanted to go to Paris, but Benard is, well, you should pardon the expression, let's just call him Johnny from the block. And I think this is probably the only history lesson where you will find an homage to Jennifer Lopez, at least this year. Johnny from the block. He's Malouin. He's got a bit of street to him, and he wants to go home. He wants to see his homies. Unfortunately, he brings his bride back to the same street where he grew up and moves into a house one door down from his mother, who's probably about the same age as his wife. See what this could lead to? Within a year, the former widow Rockefeller, she does something that women ever since have known to do as early as possible. She lawyers up. And a series of attachments, objections, petitions, writs of error, and appeals ensued. Now, Marie herself dies in 1709. And, of course, Benard, by this time he's calling himself de la Harpe because his older brother has died, so he's kind of inherited the harp. So we can call him whatever we want at this point. Johnny, if you will. He figures that he's going to inherit the family fortune, not remembering that she has children from her first marriage who are perfectly willing to continue those lawsuits. Finally, in 1715, a court says, no more, go away. He does not end up penniless, but darn close, and the kids get most of the money. Now, while the lawsuits have been going on, he is having a life. 1710, he gets married again. This time to a young woman named Jean-François Prigent de Penelon. Now, she does not survive long. We believe she dies in 1714 or 1715. A tragedy, yes, but he's got other things going on. In 1710, he buys a lovely manor house with that money that he expects that he's got his hands on thanks to the marriage contract. At the same time, he purchases a couple of honorary titles. The governor of the town of Dole, not too far from Saint-Malo, and he also becomes Lieutenant General of the Brittany Coast Guard. He buys these titles from the local bishop. Let's just say the titles don't bring him much there. In fact, made extinct by 1715. And so here he is, 1715 or so. He's lost his lawsuits. He doesn't have a whole lot of money. He's lost his titles. His wife has died. His house has been repossessed. This man has had a string of bad luck, so what do? You look for opportunities and you start listening to the agents of the Mississippi Company. John Law saying, big bucks, gold and silver in the New World. All you have to do is go to the Mississippi River and head north, my friends. And so, Jean-Baptiste Benard de la Harpe decides to get in on a good thing. From the Mississippi Company, he buys or asks for a small concession, a land grant, 4 square leagues. A league is about 2.5 to 3 miles, so basically a small chunk of land. It could be a good plantation along the banks of the Red River. He arrives in Biloxi, the administrative capital of the province of Louisiana, in August of 1718. There he meets a man who takes a shine to him immediately. The governor of Louisiana,